Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 1st of October 2024. Pinching a punch for the first of the month, no returns. Okay, we're going to go to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. Some pretty substantial figures in a number of these categories, as we are used to at the moment. 1,370 personnel lost there for the Russians. That's ticked over above the 1,300 arbitrary threshold marker I put in. That's a bad day at the office for the Russians for sure. 9 tanks is a daily average tank loss, which is, I think, still pretty significant. To lose that number a day, I think, shows that they are attacking still and they are being attrited. And 44 armored fighting vehicles goes to that end there. 44 is well over double the daily average, and that is a huge number of vehicles to lose in a single day. 33 artillery systems is not as high as we have seen, but still fairly significant, almost double the daily average. And then we have 73 vehicles and fuel tanks being a very high number there, one piece of special equipment. So Ukrainians still managing to attrit the Russians at pretty tremendous rates across these categories. We see that as well, 98 drones, tactical level drones being used, operational tactical level, sorry. And that is pretty significant. So that's going to be the number of drones sent over in these nightly waves. Also added to that will be things like Orlans and Zalas and Supercans as well. So we'll move on to look at Andrew Perpetua's loss list. He's come out with one, which is a pretty significant set of losses. Exactly what we'd expect given what we are seeing with the Ukrainian General Staff figures. So again, we are justified in believing that Ukrainian General Staff are at least largely correct. Here we have a combat asset loss ratio of about maybe even as much as 5-1. 5 Russian losses to 1 Ukrainian loss. So we're going from the artillery at the top there to the bottom of the APCs, and down with the Ukrainians artillery to APCs. So much smaller amount there, probably about a 5-1 ratio. So that is exactly what the Ukrainians would want, and that's similar, probably about a 4-1 ratio of equipment in general. We have some surveillance and comms at the top. We'll come on to artillery. Nothing too significant there with artillery losses. We've got a Leopard 2A4 tank damaged, a Vandal drone, not seen that listed before. A couple of APCs damaged, and we have 3 out of 4 MRAPs abandoned and 1 damaged. So that's pretty good damage to destroyed ratios there for the Ukrainians. A couple of trucks and some civilian vehicles as per normal, and also some civilian vehicles being driven by civilians as well at the bottom. Iskander strike. Oh no, not sorry. No, that was wrong. That is just unknown vehicles actually taken out in an Iskander strike. One presumes of a depot of some sort where the vehicles are just so fundamentally disassembled. You don't know quite what they are. Anyway, moving up to the Russian losses, we have some surveillance comms at the top. Few bits of artillery, D30, S60, ZU-23, so a bit of an autocannon on the back there. Can be seen actually as more of an air defense, really. A bit of kit that with the Ural with that on the back. 2 S7 Pion, that's a huge howitzer there. That one's destroyed, all the others damaged. Then with tanks, a really large number of tanks there. What's that going to be? Something like 15 tanks, and just over half of them destroyed and abandoned. Some tracked garden sheds thrown in there, 4 of those. T80s, T72s, and unknown tanks thrown in. So that's a large number of tanks to lose in a day. That's really significant. Infantry fighting vehicles, fairly large number, 100% of them destroyed and abandoned, and almost 100% of the fairly large number of APCs abandoned and destroyed. So bad proportion of destroyed and abandoned to damaged for the Russians, worse than the Ukrainians there. We have the usual culprits in the infantry fighting vehicles, BMP-2s, BTR-82s, and some BNDs thrown in for good measure. And for the APCs, MTLBs being lost quite freely there by the Russians. Interestingly, a Humvee damage. So that's one of the ones they've captured and then used it, and that's been damaged. Trucks and civilian vehicles, quite a lot of those. being damaged and destroyed as well. So just nothing particularly stands out as an individual piece of kit. The Russians just losing a substantial number of pieces that is just, I think, par for the course with how the Russians are operating at the moment and how they have been for some time. Trying to get an indication of the state of affairs for the Russian troops on the front line. Here we have Major Smolkotin Yuri Alexandrovich. He was ahead of the border post in the Russian-Georgian border. He was killed on the August 5th in the Kursk region. I said this yesterday, that there is some indication, at least, that as PS01 here says, the shortage of soldiers in the Russian army is severe. There's been this call for 133,000 soldiers to be drummed up by conscription. That's nothing unusual. They've got 3 months to do that. So they're going to be aiming for sort of 40,000 a month, the Russians. They are getting troops from all over the shop. So here's a border guard from the Russia-Georgia border being drafted into Kursk. So that's where they're getting these troops from, places like, Mali and abroad, as well as from their border areas, drafting them from all over the shop to try and plug these holes on the front line. I do think the Russians are somewhat short of personnel, but that doesn't stop them throwing everything they possibly can at these weak areas. Like Vuhledar at the moment, they're having success there. Like Pokrovsk, obviously, and a few other places. And also trying to stem the advances from the Ukrainians, which they have done in the Kursk area. Now we have this, talking about personnel, a propagandist has been Denis Kaluga of Izvestia, was in Chasiv on the back of a quad by the looks of it with this guy, and it goes bang. Some pretty hairy footage there. Journalists received shrapnel wounds to both legs, as well as burns and fractures. Here, it's just another propagandist operating near the front lines and being on the wrong end of some munition there. So that's quite some incredible footage of that war correspondent, so he's called. Now, there's an awful lot of footage going around now. It kind of goes in peaks and troughs. We're at a peak at the moment of footage of stuff getting blown up. Kursk, particularly, there's a lot of stuff coming out there. Vovchansk, an awful lot of equipment getting destroyed there, and then Pischany, and obviously Pokrovsk area, so on and so forth. And the Ukrainians are doing a hell of a lot of this destruction with drones. But they are providing their frontline forces, I think, with an awful lot of drones. We know that they're producing gajillions of drones and procuring them from abroad. These are replacing, to some degree, artillery, and we've seen this for some time, but particularly at the moment, just an awful lot of footage. Kvist P here sharing a video of the Kursk region in Russia having a serious Ukrainian drone problem. They're swarming over there, and it's just an awful lot of drones blowing things up, and that's in Kursk. Just really, really effective use of these drones. Andrew Perpetually said, "Yes, I wonder if this is true. I want to see the video." Well, it appears that the video, or at least some of this, is caught on footage. So he was saying yesterday, well, others were saying, I reported that, in fact, let's go to this claim here. Today in Vovchansk, Russians attempted an assault using armoured vehicles and infantry. I talked about this in my frontline update. They report the involvement of 17 MTLBs, 3 tanks, and more than 100 Russian paratroopers, of which 16 of the MTLBs were destroyed and 1 tank was hit. Incredible. 16 out of 17 MTLBs, many you would assume would have soldiers in. In fact, there is footage of this. Max 24, among many others, has footage. I think there's different footage as well of what has taken place in Vovchansk. Part of the work of the destruction of the Russians in Vovchansk by the 57th Assault Brigade. 100 killed, 25 wounded, 16 MTLBs, and 1 BMP-2 destroyed. You can go and check that footage out and see stuff getting blown up in that repelling of a Russian attack. And then we have another repelled attack after failed attack. I showed this to you in the frontline update as well, because this is a data point. You know, when we're looking at all these figures, right, and you're thinking, okay, it's an awful lot of infantry fighting vehicles, there's a lot of tanks, and you look at these stats and you're thinking, this is surely unsustainable. And then so what we started seeing was golf buggies being used, Desert Cross 1000-3s. We've seen motorbikes being used widely. These vehicles weren't being used at the beginning of the war. Why? Because they had the requisite amount of APCs and MRAPs and infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. Now they're using tanks as tracked garden sheds, putting stuff on top of them and using them as glorified APCs. The turret either doesn't work or can't work. You're thinking, why are you using a vehicle in a suboptimal way? And then they're using golf buggies to deliver troops and supplies to the front line. Why aren't you using a much better armored APC? And then they're using motorbikes for assaults. Why aren't you using APCs? Okay, there might be some advantage occasionally to some of these vehicles, but essentially they're suboptimal. And then the latest one is this coming from Null Reports, who is reporting that after failed attacks and heavy losses in armored vehicles, Russians are now forced to use Niva cars, so-called pride of the auto industry. They're using these for assaults. They transport assault groups to the attack line, and then the infantry proceeds on foot. This footage shows the repelling of another Russian assault in cars, right? So these are Russians using cars to attack. And the question is, why would you do this? Is this the optimal use of equipment? Is this the optimal equipment? These cars are then getting sort of blown up. This is what you would see the Ukrainians more normally using Humvees, Bradleys. I showed you a bit of a Bradley or reference some Bradley footage of doing sort of similar things yesterday um, in the Touretsk area. There's just, I can only conclude that they're having to use cars to deliver people to the contact line because they are desperate, because they're running out of equipment. There is no other decent explanation for why you would use cars to drive Russian troops to the contact line. And quite incredible. And if that is now, that's an anecdote, and it might just be the only time it's happened, right? But if we start seeing a pattern here, then you can conclude that things are problematic for the Russians. This is not a good sign for the Russians. Okay, first evidence that I've heard. I mean, as War Translator says, here's what's the first recorded case of downing an enemy Mavic drone using an IED dropping from another drone above it. So this is like pinpoint accuracy. You've got a drone here. So I'll let the video play. Yeah, there you've got the drone, and then they absolutely nail it. There you go. An IED drop from the drone, and it turns into a puff of smoke, and that's the end of that drone. That's perfect. They'll be high fiving back at the operator's den for that. And talking about drone hits, here we have kill marks of an FPV drone crew. So this isn't like an air defense crew. This is a drone on drone crew. So these are Zala's, Supercams, and Orlan's. Although, no, which one? No, that's Orlan. Those are Zala, those are Supercams. As the shape of them, these are. I mean, it shows you how many of these they're taking down, but also, therefore, how many the Russians are using. These reconnaissance drones are insanely important. We went through that patch of Russia having some success with spotting targets and taking out some high value Ukrainian targets. We have seen fewer of those recently, thankfully. And I'm pretty sure that's going to have a lot to do with the Ukrainians adapting and being able to take out Russian reconnaissance drones in quite large numbers. And that shows that they are being used in large numbers. Okay, now Ukrainian partisans, the Atesh partisan group, have blown up a relay cabinet on a crucial railway in Russia. Incident occurred in the Kursk Oblast. So this is reported in the Euromaidan press. They say, quote, our agents blew up a relay cabinet at one of the key railway branches through which the Russian armed forces deliver equipment and ammunition to the Kursk front line. This railway line holds strategic importance as it ensures the constant supply for the Russian army on the front, statement reads. Now, Atesh seem to be active in all sorts of places. Here it is Kursk. So you've got partisans. One presumes Russian people living locally blowing up, rather than this being a sabotage group from the Ukrainian armed forces. The Atesh appear to be partisans. So Russians going and doing that. And actually, when you go and look at Atesh and just search them on Twitter, there's an awful lot they're doing all the time. So here, September the 30th, carried out sabotage in the Kursk region. We blew up a relay cabinet. So that's one from today that we've been seeing. And actually, this has been reported elsewhere as being a different use of something. I don't know, the munitions they were using. There was something that was different about this. Like, we're trying a new thing. some kind of remote blowing up rather than throwing Molotov cocktails. They're actually properly blowing up the relay stations with more complex devices. But Atesh also they operate in Crimea, they operate in Zaporizhia. Here they do an awful lot of identifying as well. So here's an example. Atesh identified a Book One M1 SAM system and ammunition depots in Donetsk. Our agent discovered the system in Volnovaka district, which protects the depots of the village of Ribnopil. These facilities ensure the combat readiness of forces near Vuhledar. So what they do is they report these targets to the Ukrainian forces, who then strike um, those targets, as seen here. So uh, Atesh has detected a Book M3 SAM and a P18 radar in Gagarinsky district of Sevastopol, down in Crimea. The P18 radar is used for long range and early detection, target detection, relaying them to the Book M3 for destruction. The data is being transmitted to Ukrainian defense forces. Atesh are doing an incredible job of not only destroying things but facilitating the destruction of things. Now, we've got a whole spate of Russia on fire again. The chemical plant in Perm was on fire. It's fairly sizable there. Might have gone on. So, as Tim White says, allegedly a short circuit in the pump of the cooling tower. Perm is probably one of the biggest cities you may not have heard of. A lot of fires happen here. Out of the major middle class hubs, safety regulations are rarely adhered to. Now, I don't know if that fire then went on to be this fire. Just trying to work out. So, Rostov region, Russia, landscape fire. This evening, there's another fire between Bataisk and Rostov reported. So, that sounds like it's a wildfire. It's a powerful glow landscape fire near the railway tracks north of Bataisk, say local media. But then Peter Clifford reports that, saying Russia fire virus strikes between Bataisk and Rostov near the railway and at a chemical plant in the Perm region. So there might be two things going on there, right? The chemical plant and fires due to maybe strikes, not really sure. And then another freight train has also been derailed. I haven't seen the proof of that, but that's a claim there. It might be linked in one of those. So yeah, fires are happening all the time. Indeed, there's Russia's had to evacuate a village in Tambov. Poor management of wildfires saw flames, and the village of Tiki Ugol reached that village. Councils admit 28 buildings were destroyed. Locals say more than 40 were razed to the ground. Remember that conscripts usually fight fires in a wildfire season, and they are heavily involved in the war in Ukraine, fighting in, say, Kursk. So wildfires are going to spread more easily. A state of emergency has been declared in Rostov, but it's due to wildfires, not the war. The governor, Golubev, says he took the decision because of hot, dry weather and storm-like winds fanning the flames. So these are going to be starting for all sorts of different reasons, quite probably from strikes with munitions into Rostov. Rostov's been the scene of many targets, or it could have been careless smoke or whatever. But the Russians are unable to do an awful lot about it. The emergency services will be stretched. Okay, as far as distant strikes go, Ukrainian air defenses shot down 26 of the 29 Shaheeds sent into Ukraine, and the other three were lost due to electronic warfare. That's 100% interception or loss rate. Again, that's really good for the Ukrainians. Russians sending, again, a consistently large number of drones. Not as large as the night before, but still a meaningful number. But luckily, the Ukrainians, or not luckily, due to their hard work, diligence, and preparation, they are able to take 100% of them down. Zaporizhia seems to be getting slammed by aerial bombs, Russian aerial bomb hitting the high-rise building, causing all sorts of damage to that. What the Russians seem to be big fans of, taking out civilians. And speaking of which, and I'm going to be speaking to Brendan Kelly again tomorrow at, I think, midday, is it? My time. So early doors, your time if you're in the US. I think he's getting up at 7 o'clock to do that. He's going to be talking to us about the strikes in Kherson again with drones. Well, actually, the Russians sent in some rockets during at a market, at a packed market. 7 people have died. That's Kherson this morning. So as Jay and Kiev says, and I won't play you the video because there's dead bodies all over the shop. Russians just openly committing genocide now, launching rockets into crowded city marketplaces in Kherson. And yeah, 7 civilians killed and many more injured. The videos are pretty horrible. That's what Russia's doing. Just yeah, so I spoke to Brendan Kelly before. You might remember he's going to do a follow up on that. That will discuss what Russia is doing, some more stats, and what's going on with the murder of the Ukrainian civilians in these places. Now, moving on to other bits and pieces, we have, as you see there, an insanely dangerous bit of flying taking place. So this is an interception of a Russian military aircraft, or a Russian military aircraft flying like a nutter. North American Aerospace Defense Command has published a video of the interception of Russian military aircraft in the Alaska ADIZ. The incident took place on the 23rd of September. The conduct of one Russian Su-35 was unsafe, unprofessional, and endangered all. Not what you'd see in a professional air force, declared a commander, United States Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command, General Guillot. Just incredible here. Turn off the sound for that one. Absolutely incredible footage, and this is what the Russians are doing over American airspace. So there you go. They are starting to take the mickey. Russian pilot defected to Ukraine after the strike on Okhmadit, according to the Daily Telegraph. So if you remember, that was the children's hospital in Kiev that was hammered. We forget these atrocities as we move from one atrocity to another. Former advisor to the Ministry of Defense, Serhiy Kuzan, revealed the details of several operations of the GUR related to the involvement of the Russian military. Among them is a recruitment of Danilo Alfyorov, who helped 11 soldiers surrender and carried out the detonation at the headquarters of the Russian army in 2024. GUR also organized the sabotage of the Serpukhov Russist missile trough carried out by a sailor who defected to the side of Ukraine. I'm not sure about that. After a missile attack on the children's hospital in Kiev, one of the Russian pilots turned to the Ukrainian chatbot, passing on secret information about his unit. So this might be an interesting article to read in the Telegraph. Partisans and sabotages are the latest threats to Putin's war machines. Partisans inside Russia, and I was just talking about that. Insider intelligence leaks and volunteers fighting for Kiev are the keys for hurting the Kremlin. That's going to be very useful for the Ukrainians. The longer this war drags on for the Russians, the more disaffected they may become and end up giving the Ukrainians useful information. Now, worryingly, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is, quote, on the verge of blackout after Russian attack on its substation, according to the Ukrainians. The attack on a Russian-occupied plant on the verge of a blackout, again, it put the plant. The Ukraine's energy ministry said in a statement today, adding work is underway to restore full power. So that's to a substation supplying that. That's obviously not in occupied areas. So Russian forces have advanced deeper inside Vuhledar, to the most northwestern part of the city. In addition to our report yesterday, says no reports, it is now quite safe to assume Ukraine no longer holds any presence inside Vuhledar. However, I was speaking to Zhenya this morning, who was telling me that he's showed me a message of troops who are still fighting in Vuhledar. So I don't know. There could well still be troops encircled in Vuhledar, putting up a last bit of resistance there. I hope they aren't encircled. I hope there is a way out for them. But it's certainly the case that Vuhledar is not really under control of the Ukrainians anymore. And what do we have here? So this was Tim White yesterday saying of Vuhledar, speaking of incompetent generals, maybe there is some brilliant secret plan, but right now I'm appalled Ukraine still has a brigade in Vuhledar. It's catastrophic, as this Adar fighter explains. There's a route in and out, but everything gets shot up. I mean, I showed you the other day, it's under fire control. So, yeah. Also, many 200 tanks are simply lying on the roads. Food, ammunition, and fuel are running out. What do we have? The commander's been promising rotation for a week, but they're constantly delaying due to external changes and are telling us to hold on. There is no evacuation at all since the BMPs do not even have time to reach Vuhledar. They're immediately attacked. Yeah, it's... I mean, as far as rotation, you don't want rotation. You want withdrawal. But as far as I can see, that's almost certainly happened. It's going to be the last remnants in Vuhledar for the Ukrainians. That's all I have for you today. I hope that was of use for you. I'm going to be doing a live stream at 3 o'clock my time, which is sort of 3.5 hours from now, on the US elections with a voter data expert and pollster experts who has his own YouTube channel. I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be interesting. It won't pertain particularly to the Ukraine war. I noticed in one of his videos he's got a little doll of Zelensky up on the top shelf, so I presume he is a bit of a supporter of Ukraine. Anyway, that's for later, and there's also the live stream tomorrow with Brendan Kelly, and at some point on Friday, although the time and day may change, we're just trying to work out. It's really a placeholder. Just trying to work out when we can do it. But that's Daniela and Erland from Turkey. We're going to talk about Italy's aid to Ukraine. So a lot of live streams suddenly coming out. Busy, busy, busy. Anyway, take care, guys. Speak soon.